Welcome to the Mazzamuto Method, the show where we build with clarity, lead with confidence, and live with discipline. I'm your host, Gino Mazzamuto, along with Mario Mazzamuto, and we're the owners of Mazzamuto Construction and Bella Casa Cabinets. And our mission is simple: help you eliminate chaos, solve problems early, and build a life and a business you're proud of. Every episode gives you a clear plan, practical tools, and the mindset to execute at a higher level. This is where craftsmanship meets leadership. This is the Mazzamuto Method, and let's get to work. Okay, Mario, so this is our debut podcast. We've been trying to do for a long time. How do you feel about it?
Feel good. I'm excited to get it started. We got to tear off the Band-Aid sometime.
Yeah. In the business life, it's always you have things you're trying to accomplish and plans that you want for the future, but they always seem to come second to running the business. So I'm glad that we've actually set some time aside, made a plan to move forward and start documenting this stuff.
Absolutely. Yep. It's easy to do. It's easy to concentrate on customers' requests over our own requests, which is a good thing, but sometimes we have to take a step back and focus on ourselves too.
Yeah. So coming into the holidays and coming up against Thanksgiving, I thought we would take a chance to kind of talk about family, running a family business, and the balance of trying to maintain a healthy business and a healthy family dynamic. So give me your thoughts. You think it's possible to balance those two things?
It's definitely possible. The balance is a really difficult thing because wherever your focus is that's what's going to expand. And so the goal is to, it's kind of like your daily routine. You got to give some time for, whatever the heck it is, whether it's your workout, your meditation or whatever. So you have to just dedicate that time. And that's kind of what we're doing right now, is set some time aside to do this and focus on this.
Do you think that what are the biggest things that you've kind of find in your career running a business that you have to sustain the day in and day out issues and also find the time for your family?
Well, it's something we actually just talked about before recording this episode is accountability. Accountability is a massive thing. And so, everybody thinks that they can be a lone wolf and do it all on their own, but humans weren't meant to do anything on their own. We are a group species. And so having accountability to each other is a really, really big thing. And so setting goals, accountability, even if they're really, really small goals, even if it's, setting 5 minutes aside a day, we have 24 hours in a day. So, it's about baby steps, setting some small goals.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think to take that a little bit further, I think it's also having insight to yourself, because for me personally, I think as a business owner, your mind gets pulled in so many directions, and when you go home, it's not like you turn it off. You keep thinking about it. And so the constant pull for me personally is to get my mind out of the business side of it and try to focus more on things. And to be quite honest, that's difficult for me to do, because I think from our childhood, we've been so geared up with the business aspect, watching our grandfather and our father work and having that background. We've always had that in place. It's not something that we ended up falling into. So for me personally, having that mindset of a business owner almost puts that in front of everything else in my personal life comes second. So making sure that you're taking the time to think about your family and things like that, because your primary goal is to run the business because you think the business is going to sustain your personal life and give you all the tools and things that you need to make that better. But in the course of doing that, sometimes you lose that perspective.
It's very hard dynamic to balance because, we get into it like anything. Realistically, the reason you get into any career or whatever is to produce income. We live in a capitalistic society. We need money to run our day-to-day lives, but then you lose focus and it's easy to do. And so that's part of the reason to go back to, scheduling things, and things that get scheduled get done is what they say, and having some accountability. And, you got to do it in your personal life and you got to do it in your business life. And so having some accountability with your spouse and your kids and making some promises and stuff like that, kind of, hold your feet to the fire. Otherwise, it's easy not to do those things.
Do you think that it's made harder by the fact of our background, seeing the work ethic that your grandfather and your father put in? Do you think that hurts you and makes you more aware of the pitfalls, or does that add a layer of importance to you because you're trying to maintain what they kind of set the pathway for?
Well, I think it definitely does make it harder because, our dad and our grandfather, these guys are, workhorses, and these guys just put their head down and just work hard. And our dad is 80 years old this year and he still works 7 days a week. And so, but at the same time, we can learn from that, and we can see the things that, that maybe they could have done better, which means that we could do better. So yeah, is it easier just to go get a job and have a 9 to 5 and be able to clock out and turn everything off? Sure. But, at the same time, a life that you really, can dream about, you have to, it's going to be more difficult. And so you have to set these things up in such a way. And so, you have to set yourself, like I said, you got to schedule these things and keep these things in mind. We're not going to be perfect. We're going to drop the ball plenty of times. But the goal is to pick it up tomorrow and try to do a little bit better.
How important do you think that it is to have a good spouse as far as having them support your dreams, but also be that counterbalance against making sure that you have somebody to kind of keep you in line when maybe you're falling in the way of working too much?
Yeah, for sure. It's like anything else. It's like the accountability side we just talked about. If you have a spouse that's not honest with you and just holds everything in and then unleashes on you one day that you don't spend enough time with your kids and they want a divorce, that's a problem. And so, having a spouse that's going to, allow you the flexibility, and they know that that's what you do. I remember when my wife, Jessica, and I started dating years ago. And she wanted me to take Friday off. And I said, man, I can't take Friday off. I got too much stuff going on. I got appointments booked. She said, I thought that was the whole point of you being self-employed. I said, oh, it's not like that. I got to book it out in advance. You can do that, but you can't just drop everything. When you have appointments, you have responsibilities, you have people waiting on you. So, it's a learning process, and she kind of had to learn the process of hey, this is what it's like being married or at the time dating somebody who's self-employed. Self-employed people do work a lot until you get your business up to a point to where you can have other people handle some of those items, which, we do more nowadays, but we still have a lot of things that keep us busy, and we still work late and sometimes weekends.
Well, that leads to another point, which is that sometimes by developing that process of putting in the hours up front, you find people that's their goal, right? Is they want to put in all this time up front, build the business so they can ultimately slow down. But you see that when they put that time in up front, they kind of build themselves around that. And then they get to a point where they don't know how to stop that because they've been doing it for so long. They can't change their method. And so they almost lock themselves into a place that they can't get out of.
Yeah. It's a lot of this navigating is also unlearning certain things, because that's the difficult part. When you're a one-man show, you're used to doing everything. And then when you have to start delegating, everybody even has to learn. Every single business owner I've ever talked to had to learn to delegate and had to learn to trust other people. Because that's what do most people say, our dad included, is nobody will ever do it as good as you.
Right.
And that's where we lean on, what we're kind of trying to do is maybe, is pass down some information that some gold nuggets that we've learned. And I learned that from John Maxwell, who's an excellent business coach. And he says that if you can hire somebody to do your job at 70% capacity that you can do it at, you should never do that job again.
And I remember when we talked about that years ago, and you told me that kind of stuck with me, because it is hard to do something. You're building something that you have focused all your energy on, it becomes your baby. And then, yeah, so you think nobody can do it as well as I can. And then also the fear of giving that to somebody and potentially having it fall apart. So it takes trust in people. But the thing is, I think to a certain extent, we always overemphasize our own importance. We think that nobody can do it like this. And that's true. I mean, nobody's going to have the investment that an owner does. It's just because you have the incentive to keep going, right? And you feel that pressure, especially for us, because we look back to our grandfather, our father coming over here after World War II, you know, the development of them building a business. And so when we think about the potential losses that we can sustain if things go wrong, it's not just a business, we're tied to it with a family legacy. So that puts another additional burden of pressure on us, you know, to maintain that. But it's hard to kind of delegate that. But if you don't do it at some point, you know, you what are you working for? And I think the other thing is, it's in this day and age, with the amount of talent that's out there, especially with the, you know, the availability of virtual assistants, which you can get for a very competitive price. And a lot of these people have doctorates and PhDs and whatever you want, civil engineering degrees. And so they're more than capable of doing it. Obviously, you got to put the training in to bring them up to speed to do it. But you know, like you said, you have to at some point step back and give somebody responsibility.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to do, for sure. It's kind of like when you teach your kids to do chores around the house and they're sitting there sweeping and you're going, oh my God, they're just missing everything. But part of the process is you got to let them make those mistakes, you know, and you have to learn to control yourself and not to step in ultimately and try to solve every single problem. And, you know, it's a learned thing for sure. Like I said, I've had this conversation, it seems like thousands of times with other business owners, and everybody you find has very similar struggles, and they think it's going to be so easy. They're just going to hire somebody and it's all going to get solved, and it's not. And you have to do a lot of unlearning yourself. You have to relearn things yourself. You have to, you know, learn to control yourself. And if you can't do that, you can't ever scale and grow a company.
Right.
And, you know, this is all personal development stuff, which is, I've been a nut about personal development for the past 30 years of my life, practically, it seems like. And, you know, it's in learning these things. It's a lot less about business, and you figure out it's a lot of your own personal stuff, your own personal demons. And, it's challenging, but the other side of it is you get a lot out of it. And the better you get at this, it actually does help in your own personal life, your own home life and all that. You get better at understanding yourself, understanding other people, understanding what motivates you and motivates other people. And you learn to be a lot more honest with yourself and more honest with other people as well.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And I think that's something that I've learned over the years is one of the coolest things about this business is the psychological portion of it. You know, whether you're talking about developing yourself as a person, it also has to do with your interactions with customers, because you see so much of people in a way that I don't think a lot of other businesses do, because you're in their house, you're dealing with their finances, you see the dynamic between them and their wife, you know, whether it's the husband saying the wife makes all the decisions, or this is her project, or whatever that is, or maybe the guy's the money guy or whatever. So you see all these different dynamics. And, you know, when you're talking about remodeling, you're talking about something that has a lot of pressure involved in it, whether that's your internal pressure of trying to balance your home life and work, or the pressure of putting out a good product, but also staying profitable, and keeping guys employed. So there's a lot of psychological things you can pull from it, but it does make you kind of, if you don't take the time to reflect on how you as a person integrate with it. And it has a way of taking you over and you losing perspective to everything else. And I think for me personally, I tell people a lot, when we started doing this, I didn't really want to be in this business because I saw the hours that Dad put in and the toll it took on our parents' marriage. And, he was a different story, coming from, we talk about the pressure of ourselves for our business, but we're a third generation, immigrants. Imagine the pressure on a first generation, I'm sorry, we're second generation because Dad was born in Sicily, but imagine the pressure of him coming over and feeling that all that is on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he comes from a generation where you didn't have access to the internet. You didn't have access to virtual assistants. You didn't have access to podcasts and learning things. You had to do everything yourself. And so seeing that, I just thought to myself, that's something that I don't think I would want to take on in my own life. But, I'm glad that I came around and eventually fell into it. But it's a hard thing to balance, especially seeing all the negative effects that it can have. Now, I would also say there's a lot of positives. I mean, we had a great childhood growing up. We were just looking at photos earlier of us with Papa and in the workshop and how that shaped our dynamic. And most people don't have that. And that's something that is why it's important to have the balance, because we have to maintain that balance so we can also pass it on to our kids.
Absolutely. We'll have to record another episode specifically on this, but what Gino just mentioned is our grandfather actually, he's the one who pushed us to start our own business and basically set it up for us. In our first business, we must have been 8 years old or something like that. And we made, windmills with him. So we went around to these old ladies' houses that had the old lady washing the clothes windmill and the little Roadrunner windmill that they put on the top of their fence or their deck or whatever. And our grandfather would say, "Hey, would you like a brand new windmill? If you let us borrow this one so we can take it apart and recreate it." So we took it apart and traced it all and made the parts and put a new one together. And then we'd give the person a brand new one. And we went to swap meets and things like that and sold them there. So those are the things that, we learned early on, entrepreneurship and you don't realize, this is something I tell my kids, is that we learned a lot through osmosis as kids. Even though we weren't sitting there day to day in the business, we were watching all the time, and you don't realize how much you learn just by watching. And I think that's what made it a little easier for Gino and I both when we decided to become business owners or self-employed, is that we didn't realize the amount of knowledge that we had just by being around it and just by watching and learning.
So speaking about that, I wanted to ask you, what do you think the hardest part of working with family is?
We're just dealing with that today. It's personalities, and you get to choose your friends, you don't get to choose your family. And so you tend to have a lot more in common with your friends, and that's why you choose them. With family, you tend to have a little less in common with them typically, but you're stuck with them. What are you going to do? And so you got to be way more patient. And, we just had a little bit of a debate today, not Gino and I, we were on the same team, but with somebody else in the family. And,
you can say who that is. It's Tony.
Tony, our other brother. He just thinks so much differently than we do. And so he kind of questions everything that we want to do. And it's good. It's good to get questioned. It's good to test the things that you're doing. And but at the same time, sometimes it's frustrating. At the same time, you have to explain yourself all the time. But, it's a lot of patience, man. And, I think we got a lot of our actual fights out when we were teenagers and things like that. And we've done a lot of self growth and I think had we not done that, I think this probably wouldn't work out.
I agree.
And, so it's not easy.
No, you're right. And I think that's one of the things that, I think in any family business, I think that the problem is a lot of family businesses jump into it thinking that it's going to be an easy deal because they're dealing with their family. The truth of it is, I think in a lot of ways, it can be almost twice as hard as running a normal business, in the way that you can't just go to your brother or your father or, somebody and say, hey, you're doing this wrong. You need to fix it, and have that critical approach like you would do to an employee. But the other side of it is that you're able to have somebody that you can know that you're on the same page with, and that you can speak openly about and critique each other in a way that you wouldn't feel comfortable opening yourself up that way to somebody else. An employee, for example, because you might have the fear that you're exposing yourself too much or other things. But it's a powerful thing if you can really tame it. And I think by having a certain amount of career separation early on and learning your own kind of lessons and going out into the world, and then when you come back to it, you realize what value there is.
Yeah, absolutely. I did things on my own mostly for many, many years. I've been outside of the family business for 20 years, something like that, and had to do a lot of it on my own. And in that, realizing again that, none of us really can sustain the lone wolf thing. It's not real. You're going to fail at some point in time. And, I think, all that probably helped me to want to make this work. Cause that's the thing. You actually have to want to make it work, cause it's not easy. Any form of partnership is not easy. And so there's got to be gives and takes, right? Give and take. And, you gotta be willing to bend a little bit. If you can't bend, then it ain't gonna happen. I think that's probably what took me the longest time to finally come over. Is Gino finally had the conversation with me and saying, "Hey, I finally got Dad to bend a little bit. He's getting older. He's getting softer. He's saying okay more." And I just didn't want to deal with that early on. That's why I went out on my own and did my own thing for many, many years.
Well, also I think that the topic of this podcast is the business, balancing business and family, but kind of the inspiration of this podcast. And I think also, if I had to speak for you, I think in our conversations past, you've made this point, is that our father is getting older. Luckily he's still in really good shape, and probably in some ways better shape than us. But the thing is, everybody has a lifespan, and at some point that's going to be up for all of us. So giving up certain things for us, whether that's financial or the independence or whatever you're giving up to be in a family business, it's worth it, because once he's gone, you're not going to have that chance. So even though we struggle with him, because he comes from the old way of thinking where, everybody should have a tool belt on and be swinging a hammer. And when he sees us sitting behind desks doing paperwork,
we're not working.
He doesn't understand the importance of it. But it's a different era than he was. But the point of it is that with all the negatives, the biggest positive that we're going to take away from this is all the time that we had to spend together. I mean, so many families, how many families have you known that you go into properties and whether it's the parents that have passed away and the kids come in from out of town, and the kids basically, they haven't seen the parents in years, because whether they move out of town or they just don't see each other. So having the ability to interact every day, even though there's a lot of negative that comes along with it because your personalities clash. And also, as business owners, for me and Mario, it was hard for my father to take a step back and understand that he wasn't the decision maker anymore.
Yeah.
Trust us. Yeah. So I think, but that benefit of having those years, we're going to appreciate, going forward.
Yeah, it's definitely, man, it's been quite a challenge. And before even becoming a business owner with our father, we decided to all live in close proximity to each other. That's another thing, is that it's almost like we live on a compound. We just bought properties all next door to each other, and we have gates going to each other's houses. And that was problematic in the beginning, you know, and, you know, people get upset and intrusion on other people's spaces and whatever. And, you know, and so none of it's easy, and none of it's pretty, and it can get ugly. But I think ultimately, what really helped us is that we had a good foundation with our grandparents. We had a very, you know, we were always taught that family is very important, and you need to, you know, persevere and learn to forgive and all those sort of things. And so a lot of that set the foundation for this and making this able to work. We still live close to each other. We still see each other a lot. Even if I wasn't working here or Gino wasn't working here, we'd still see each other a lot. And, you know, our dad's with my kids, for instance, every day practically. And so all those things like you talked about, you know, it may be a pain in the butt now sometimes, but, you know, when it's all said and done, we're going to look back and really be thankful that we got to spend a lot of time with them. It's the best memories of my entire life, or the amount of time we got to spend with our grandparents.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's, we lost our mom some years ago, and, you know, it seems like it's never going to happen. And when it does, you realize, like, I think every single person on earth probably says the same thing. I wish I would have spent more time with that person.
Yeah.
And so this gives us a reason to spend more time with our dad. And yeah, sometimes, it makes it fun. Let's just say.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And, you know, I think that customers appreciate that, because the thing that we find is that having that dynamic really makes people feel comfortable, even though it's a little bit unusual. You know, you have my father showing up on job sites, you know, bringing the guys lunch, and then, you know, next thing you know, you're having long conversations with them. But it gives that personal feeling. But I think one of the things I wanted to kind of touch on in this episode is give people tips of, you know, of how the best to navigate these type of things. So what would you say the biggest thing for you as an entrepreneur trying to balance multiple things and family? What did you find the best tip that you can give to people?
Well, again, scheduling, I think, is huge. And, you know, when it comes to family time, putting your phone on silent, putting your phone away. You know, the phone is a beautiful thing, but it can be a curse all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so we have to learn to have discipline around that and turn it off and walk away from it sometimes. And you know, scheduling things is huge. Scheduling time with your family is just as important as scheduling time with your clients or your crew or whatever. So that's really, really big. And again, having some accountability and, you know, setting some goals and is really, really big. And so, you know, in our family, we love to set some like vacation goals and things like that. And, you know, whether it be a dream board or just having a conversation with somebody, that's pretty cool. And I think, you know, for Gino and I, we both love, you know, growing the business. And so having some goals around that and kind of pushing each other to do that, it makes it very exciting. You know, somebody a lot smarter than me once said, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So having something to look forward to, whether it be in your personal life, your business life, or whatever, is really, really big. And it keeps you kind of going. It's kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I agree with all that. An additional point, I think the biggest thing for me growing in this business is that you get to a point where if you're not careful, the business can basically take over your life. I remember when I started dating my wife, and I would be taking customer phone calls, 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night. And she said to me, you got to find work-life balance. You can't do this. And I thought at the time, well, this is how I sustain all of this. Without this, without me doing this, I wouldn't be able to provide certain things. And it's the same thing with a vacation. Before I started dating her, I couldn't remember the last time I went on vacation because I never thought that I could step away from the business. And then, because you think, well, you walk away, everything's going to fall apart. But you do these things, you start cutting out these portions of your business life, and then you realize that everything actually is fine without it. In some ways, it's better because you're able to. You don't realize the pressure you're putting on your own self, and you think that these things are insurmountable issues, and then you remove them and you go, wow, it actually gives me some time to breathe and reconstruct myself around these things. But I think that's the biggest problem as business owners, especially individual business owners, that have to do all these things on their own.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a business owner, you're probably also type A personality, which is a go-getter, somebody who's, a bit of an alpha, and you want to do everything yourself. You want to be the boss with everything. But I think like being able to having a spouse, I think helps. Having kids and things like that help. It helps kind of balance you a little bit. And it's tough, man. It's tough to like turn that off and turn off the boss mentality or the alpha mentality sometimes and be subdued a little bit. But I think it's kind of like, whether anybody listening believes in religion or not, it's kind of like, allowing yourself to be vulnerable a little bit and turning that off. And I think it definitely helps because, like yourself, I don't think I started taking vacations either till my wife and I started dating. And if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would ever go on a vacation. And so, it's kind of like yin and yang. There's a give and take. We can't burn the candle at both ends forever. It will eventually catch up with us.
Yeah.
And I find myself being a lot happier sometimes being forced to take a vacation.
Yeah.
And you come back a little bit more refreshed sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes for sure. And, but I think the other thing is that as, to maintain that family business dynamic and make sure that you're putting your family in the same category as your business, it's also finding ways to deal with what you're taking on yourself. I remember one thing is having a business phone versus a personal phone. I always liked giving out my personal phone number to customers because I thought to myself, oh, it gives them a chance to, feel like I'm invested in it and they can connect with me. And that's great. But to be quite honest, I found that a lot of customers took advantage of that sometimes because most customers are like us. When they get home from work, they're going to walk into their job and then they're going to see something and potentially. So I remember getting phone calls at night and, there was one specific, it was, we had a guy working for us and he cleaned up the job site and they had a hardwood floor. And he wiped down the hardwood floor with water to clean up after he walked out. Well, it made the wax turn milky. And so I got a text from her at like 7:00 at night when she got home from work and saying her hardwood floors are ruined. And of course, my thing is, oh crap, this is going to cost me a lot of money. How am I going to fix this? And then the next day I show up and then by the time the water had dried and the hardwood floors are fine. But the point of it is that you tend to absorb all the worries that customers have. So by making yourself accessible after a certain period of time, because that night basically was ruined for me because I was up just stressing about it the whole night. And the ultimate takeaway from that too is, as a business owner, I think after a certain amount of time, you find that all the things that you always worry about, whether it's delegating procedure, hiring a new employee, getting new jobs, customer dynamics, financials, whatever it is. Early on, when you're first starting to deal with that, you put so much pressure on yourself because you think you're worried about all these things. So I think the biggest takeaway is 90% of the things that you worry about end up not happening, or you find a solution. And sometimes that solution is you're actually glad that problem came up, because then you find a creative solution around it.
Absolutely. Yep. It's one of the things I learned about learning is you don't learn anything without making a mistake. Everybody knows what hot coffee is because you've burned your mouth on it before. Everybody knows what a hot stove is because you've burned your hand on it before. And so we have to be honest with ourselves and give ourselves a little grace that we can't learn anything without making some mistakes. And so, it may be painful. We may have a client that's upset about something, or a kid or a spouse or a family member or whatever friend that's upset about something, but understanding as long as you're not making that same mistake 100 times, then you're learning. And it's okay to make it even twice or 3 times, but eventually you want to stop banging your head on the wall and learn from that. And, I think, in doing so, you give yourself a bunch of grace and be okay with the whole process of, it's bumpy, man, and you're going to bump along the way, but things get better.
Yeah. Well, I think, and the final takeaway as we wrap up this podcast is, remember that the reason you started a business in the first place is to make a good life for yourself. So make sure that you're focusing on those things and not letting the business become your life, because it is a tool at the end of the day. It's a way for you to grow and to provide for your family. So don't lose perspective of that, and make sure that, yes, you want the business to be successful, but if you ruin everything in the process, it's not worth it. And I remember one of the things that Dad imparted on us long ago was him saying, I've worked for doctors, lawyers, judges, people that built careers and were super wealthy, but when they passed away, what did they have to show for it? And ultimately, you can make yourself sick by working too hard, the stress you take on, and no amount of money is going to make you healthy again.
Yeah, that's for sure. What is it? Is it the Dalai Lama? I think he says that he never understood about Western society. I think it was him who said it, that Americans, they work their whole lives just to get sick and take their money to try to get healthy, versus just, slowing down and being healthy, along the way. So yeah, for sure. If I had to bullet point this episode, I would say that, it's having some discipline and with yourself and your time and all that, and keeping your priorities straight and protecting your time. And in doing so, you're doing actually better for your clients, because you're allowing more time for clients, and then your own personal life, scheduling things, get it on the calendar, even in your personal life. Everybody's schedule is business stuff, but we don't take enough time to schedule our personal stuff. Practice a little bit of humility and admit that you may not know everything, and maybe you're only one good hire away from being able to scale your business, and then free up your time a little bit. And I think lastly is just having fun in the whole process, and don't take it too seriously. It's easy to do. It's easy to take seriously, easy to get stressed out, but enjoy the process, smell the roses a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And in the next episode, or one of the upcoming episodes, we should talk about utilizing virtual assistants, because I think that's one of the big things in this day and age, that we have the ability, because even if you just hire somebody to answer your phone calls and respond to emails and kind of keep you on task, it takes that one thing less for you to have to do. And they're so economical and versatile. But there's always kind of been a stigma around it, because you feel like you're exporting talent, so we can talk about that in another episode. But I hope that you guys found this podcast interesting. We're trying to fill a dynamic of making it both for the customer, for the business owner, and for your personal life, so you can take a little bit away from everything. Because I think, it all blends together at the end of the day. So this is our second podcast. We're going to work on getting more structured and having more things that can help assist not only the customer, but also the business owner. So thanks for listening to the Mazzamuto Method. If today's episode brought you clarity, confidence, or a useful strategy, share it with somebody who needs it. And if you're ready to build without chaos in your home, your business, or your life, follow the show for more tools and directions. Remember, a strong foundation builds strong futures. We'll see you in the next episode.
Have a good one.